If it's Friday, sources tell NBC News key GOP leaders are now urging former President Trump to pull his endorsement of North Carolina's gubernatorial candidate Mark Robinson after a bombshell report alleging he made racist, anti-Semitic, and sexist comments online. Plus, the Republican governor of Ohio denounces former President Trump and Senator J.D. Vance's rhetoric on Springfield migrants as the former president plans to visit the city, despite the objections of local officials. And growing fears of an all-out war between Israel and Lebanon, as the IDF says it carried out a targeted airstrike on a top Hezbollah leader in Beirut, following this week's stunning string of deadly exploding wireless devices all across Lebanon. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in Washington with just 46 days to go and early voting now underway in several states. We begin in battleground North Carolina, where a bombshell report detailing highly inappropriate and racist comments allegedly made by Republican gubernatorial nominee Mark Robinson is rippling through one of the election's most important presidential battlegrounds, with new reaction from both campaigns and new reporting from NBC News on the fallout facing the former president. It comes after CNN reported that Robinson made dozens of lewd, inflammatory, and racist comments on the message board of a pornography website, including referring to himself as a, quote, black Nazi. In a video released before the story dropped, Robinson said the words were not his, and he is vowing to stay in the race.
Let me reassure you, the things that you will see in that story, those are not the words of Mark Robinson. Folks, we've seen this type of stuff in the past as well. Clarence Thomas famously once said he was the victim of a high-tech lynching. Well, it looks like Mark Robinson is too. We are staying in this race. We are in it to win it. And we know that with your help, we will.
Now, the deadline for Robinson to drop out was midnight last night, and he's staying in, and the North Carolina Republican Party is standing by its nominee. And now new reporting just in from NBC News, as sources tell us that former President Trump has no plans to pull his endorsement either, even as he faces calls from his allies and from within his own campaign to do so. According to a person familiar with the matter, prominent Republican members of North Carolina's congressional delegation, including both of its senators and the current RNC chairman, are all planning to urge Mr. Trump to pull his endorsement. A longtime booster of Mark Robinson, the former president will be in North Carolina for a rally tomorrow, a state he won by less than 2 points in 2020. Robinson is not expected to attend. Democrats, meanwhile, are playing up Trump's ties to Robinson. The Harris campaign today out with a new ad on Robinson's past abortion comments. The DNC is also launching a new digital ad campaign and billboards noting some of Trump's effusive praise from earlier in this cycle, like this. Look.
This is Martin Luther King on steroids. Okay, now, I told that to Mark. I said, I think you're better than Martin Luther King. I think you are Martin Luther King ×2.
What I said to this man, and when he endorsed me, he gave a speech, and I said, you are Dr. Martin Luther King on steroids. That's how good you are. You are unbelievable as a speaker. And he got up, and he's doing fantastically well in North Carolina, and I think he's going to be the next governor of North Carolina. Mark Robinson.
Now, folks, we are just 46 days out from Election Day. We are left with some major questions about the impact of this controversy. Could the fallout spill over into the presidential contest in North Carolina or other states? Or could it blow over like so many other outlandish and offensive statements of the Trump era? My NBC News colleague Antonia Hilton is on the ground in North Carolina. Also with us is Dawn Baumgartner-Vaughn, State Capitol Bureau Chief at the Raleigh News and Observer, and Dasha Burns, who covers the Trump campaign for NBC News. Thanks to all of you for starting us off. Dasha, let me start with you. Donald Trump set to campaign in Wilmington, North Carolina tomorrow, as sources are telling us, I know you've been working your sources, that his allies are calling on him to rescind his endorsement of Robinson. So far, he is digging in, saying he's not going to do that. What more do you know?
Yeah, Kristen, that's exactly right. It's his allies. It's people within his campaign. Sources telling us that these conversations are ongoing. One source who's been involved in the discussion telling me that Trump has been going back and forth on this. But it's true. As of now, he has not gotten on board with pulling that endorsement. There's a possibility that he does a sort of half step here where he doesn't necessarily pull the endorsement, but disavows the actions and what we have now all seen in that explosive report. You've also got members of the North Carolina senators from North Carolina, Senator Ted Budd, Senator Tom Tillis, saying that they want him to pull that endorsement, according to our sources. We did just get a comment from Senator Budd here. He says that the comments reported in the article are disgusting. Mark Robinson says they're not from him. He needs to prove that to the voters. We're also hearing that RNC Chairman Michael Whatley is in contact with the former president, also urging him to pull his endorsement. Whatley is, of course, from North Carolina. So a lot of pressure here. This is a tough one for the former president, given the comments that you just played earlier there. He did give a full-throated endorsement to Robinson, and the Democrats are already seizing on that, Kristen.
They sure are, and it's just fascinating. You read the statement from Bud there where he says you've got to prove it. So challenging and complicated to do, particularly in this era, and given all of the evidence that came to bear in that initial reporting. Dasha, don't go anywhere. I'm going to come back to you for a couple more questions. But, Antonia, let me go to you now on the ground in North Carolina. So the deadline has officially passed for him to drop out of the race. You have been talking to people there, getting the real-time reaction. What are they telling you, Antonia?
Yeah, Kristen, I've been talking with voters, but also with political operatives here at the state level, reacting to this in real time. You know, throughout the day yesterday, people on all sides were bracing for this. The rumor had spread about what might be in this report. And so preparations were already underway, and that effort to try to get Robinson to step aside has been the talk of the town here. And is now stretching into its second day. So Republicans are kind of walking this fine line, as Dasha just spelled out, of sort of this uncertainty around how to disavow the comments, but potentially keep Robinson in the fold. The major concern being that Robinson could be seen as a drag on the entire Republican ticket. And then the Democrats, in many ways, kind of gleeful about this, celebrating, already out with that digital ad that you showed. But the voters here, many of them describe this to me as really a sad sign of the times. Take a listen to some of the conversations I've had.
Stunning to me that you would then purport to espouse conservative Christian values, because it seems to be completely hypocritical.
We really feel conflicted because we feel both parties are moving to the extremes. Many Republicans have their mind made up, and I'm not sure they're going to change.
I spent some time talking to a Republican voter here, too, who told me that, look, you know, he likes Robinson's policies. This is all alleged, and it really didn't make that much of a difference to him. And so I think you may see that some Republicans stay very firmly on Robinson's side here, no matter what the rest of the GOP delegation does here. Because they've missed that deadline, they say they're standing by their guy, Kristen.
Well, and it comes as Democrats are launching a messaging campaign, a push to really link Trump to Robinson. Talk a little bit about the strategy inside the Harris campaign now.
Oh, yeah. Expect to see the clip of former President Trump tying or comparing Robinson to MLK here locally and nationally a lot over the next coming days and weeks. You're going to see images of them appearing together, photographs of people at events with him already. In some cases, some of the state level Republicans here have started deleting images of themselves at events with Robinson. And I spoke to one of the Democratic Party chairs here, the second vice chair, Dr. Kimberly Hardy, today, and she told me that that's really part of the strategy for the entire Democratic ticket now.
All right. Well, Antonia Hilton with The View and some great interviews on the ground there in North Carolina. Thank you so much, Antonia. It's always great to see you and get your great reporting. Let me turn now to Dawn. Dawn, look, Robinson is a sitting elected official. So I think a lot of people are wondering, why is this just coming to light now? Can you talk a little bit about the evolution of this? And again, broader context here, not his first controversial comment.
Exactly. So he's the incumbent lieutenant governor. He did not hold political office until running for lieutenant governor. There was a crowded primary, and he was kind of a surprise when he won that Republican primary and becoming lieutenant governor. He's known for this. He became famous he already had a social media following of these Facebook selfie videos and said all kinds of controversial things, including about women and abortion. And then he had a viral speech at a city council meeting that was pro gun rights. And he's said a lot of insulting comments about LGBTQ plus people in the past. So this kind of goes along. It's a much worse. It's, beyond the pale, a lot of the things there. And of course, he, called Martin Luther King, a series of racial slurs. So it's a different level of it. And even though he's denying it, the evidence that CNN laid out is it's enough that I think a lot of people believe it. And Republicans don't want to go on record right now and say anything about him, because then they're connected to him, and they don't want to be connected to him at all right now, because he's going to make them lose.
Well, so which takes me to my next question. Let's talk about former President Donald Trump. Real jitters inside Trump world that he could be dragged down by this, as you are saying. Talk a little bit about that link between Trump and Robinson. I mean, he helped Robinson become who he is today. He has endorsed him as well.
Exactly, for sure. I mean, they're together. The Republican state treasurer, Del Folwell, is an outspoken critic of Robinson. He lost to Robinson in the primary. He told me yesterday that this is just what, everybody should already know, that he called it fleecing, that Robinson is fleecing taxpayers, fleecing donors, and that as far as leaving the race, it would, of course, the deadline for that is passed now, but it would be up to Trump, who endorsed him, helped him rise to fame. And Whatley, as you mentioned, is from North Carolina. So it's if Trump gives the message when he's here in Wilmington tomorrow that he doesn't like Robinson anymore, that will actually kind of free up a lot of Republicans who at this point are pretty, or they're mad too, but afraid to say anything about it publicly because they're worried about their base voters.
Let's talk big picture about North Carolina politics. It is a unique state. It is known for having voted for a president and governor of different parties in 8 of the past 15 presidential elections, Dawn. So do you think this is going to fundamentally change how voters approach how they're going to vote in November, or is ticket splitting just a part of what happens in North Carolina?
Well, I've been looking even in the primary that the state could go for Trump and then also Josh Stein, the Democratic Attorney General, that's Robinson's opponent. And some of it is the personality. Robinson has never really talked much about policy at all until just very recently. And, I've met people who are supporters of Obama and Hillary Clinton and Trump. And so we're the state of Madison Cawthorn and John Edwards. There's plenty of scandals in the past here, but Robinson was already down in the polls before this. And a lot of that had to do with Republican women voters who didn't like the kind of comments he made about abortion, about women in general, just about anybody, just kind of the series of insults that he just kind of says now, said in the past. And that's a real turnoff to a lot of voters, no matter what party you are.
It's just fascinating to have your perspective, Dawn, Bob Gartner, Vaughn. We really appreciate your inside look and your great reporting. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Dasha, let me go back to you now. This, of course, not the first time that Trump has endorsed a candidate who's been embroiled in scandal. You think about Roy Moore, you think about Herschel Walker, who ran for Senate in Georgia. What is Trump world saying about this? Are they downplaying this pick within that broader context? How are they explaining it?
I mean, look, Kristen, thanks to the great reporting of our colleagues, including yourself, we know that the former president is resistant and has been in the past. Those other candidates you mentioned are an example of letting scandal sway his decision or letting scandal make him change his endorsement. He feels like, even if it might be a smart decision to back away from Robinson, that it could potentially make him look weak or anger some folks in the base, according to the sources that we've been talking to. And it would be a first for the former president to pull an endorsement based on this kind of bombshell report. Even as striking as this is, it seems like he's resistant to it. And the Trump campaign has put out a statement, but not mentioning Robinson directly. They just said that North Carolina is important to them to win the White House. And we have not yet heard from the former president directly on this. He will be, though, as we said earlier in the show, here in Wilmington for a rally tomorrow. Robinson will not be in attendance. We'll see, though, if he makes any sort of statement there, Kristen.
It's going to be absolutely fascinating to see what, if anything, former President Donald Trump has to say about this latest twist in the gubernatorial race. Dasha Burns, thank you so much. Great to see you. Really appreciate it. For more on this, joining me now is former Republican governor of North Carolina, Pat McCrory. Governor McCrory, thank you so much for joining me. It's always great to see you.
Good seeing you, too. I wish on better circumstances regarding our beautiful state of North Carolina.
Well, I know this is a tough one for you, and I do want to get your reaction. I want to start by reading you a post from North Carolina Senator Thom Tillis. Let me read you a part of it. Quote, "It was a tough day, but we must stay focused on the races we can win. We have to make sure President Trump wins North Carolina and support the outstanding GOP candidates running for key NCGA and judicial races. If Harris takes North Carolina, she takes the White House. We can't let that happen." Do you read into that, Governor, that Senator Tillis has all but given up on the governor's race? Is it over in his eyes?
Well, Thom Tillis is not the type of candidate or public servant that Mark Robinson is. He's a true professional. But I put a lot of this on the feet of Michael Whatley, who at the time was North Carolina chairman. He got promoted to national chairman, but Mark Robinson was a social media star, political star, one of the first, based upon a YouTube during a Greensboro City Council meeting. And what the Republican Party didn't do, he sounded great on TV. He appealed to the masses. As I've said before, he's one of the most effective but dangerous speakers I've ever been around regarding talking to the populist agenda. But Michael Whatley and the Republican Party 4 years ago should have done a better job of vetting. I think it's a lesson learned for Republican and Democrats. If you're a social media superstar during a short period of time, you better do your vetting if they're trying to get a promotion. And sadly, this information, before this bomb exploded, the fuse has been lit for 3 years. Even conservative websites have been questioning his business ethics in 2 nonprofits that really do not fit the Republican or conservative agenda whatsoever, much less this horrendous other language that was released yesterday in a timely manner, the day that we cannot get a replacement.
Do you think he can still win the governor's race, or in your eyes, is the race over?
I think it was over before this because of other announcements that he made and also because of his business ethics. I anticipate more information to be leaked out. I guarantee you the Democrats had a thick file on Mark Robinson, and they were hoping for Mark to win the general election, win the primary. He defeated 3 very well-qualified people who could have won the general election, but he's an impressive speaker. I want to compliment Senator Ted Budd for making the strongest comments, because Senator Budd was helped a lot against me in the primary by a Mark Robinson commercial, a false commercial, but a very effective commercial, and run by the Club for Growth. So that's how strong a voice Mark Robinson was with the base, that even in a U.S. Senate campaign, he helped influence that election. But I compliment Senator Budd for having the courage to say enough.
Let me get your reaction to what NBC News is reporting, which is that allies, even some campaign officials inside the Trump campaign, are urging him to drop his endorsement of Mark Robinson. Should he do it? And could this hurt Trump in the state?
I think he was hurting Trump before this bombshell announcement.
So should he drop his endorsement? Should he drop his endorsement?
The Trump campaign has been avoiding him for the past 4 weeks. And almost all the video that was shown is video longer than a month, except for 2 weeks ago when Robinson snuck up behind sheriffs to get on the stage with Trump. The Trump team didn't want him on stage because they had heard rumors that more information is coming out. Everyone in Republican circles have heard that more and more bad stuff is coming out. And I put that very mildly because it's stronger than bad stuff.
Should Trump drop his endorsement of Robinson?
I think everyone should say this guy is not qualified.
So safe to say
what's that? I'm kind of in a media. I'm with PBS right now on a media show, so I'm trying to refrain from endorsements or not endorsements. But in any other political environment, this person would be out. We had this with Cal Cunningham, a Democrat, in a Senate race years ago, where during the last month things came out with Cal Cunningham. He stayed in the race, and of course, it was a pretty large landslide for the Republicans. So now it's turning on Republicans, and both parties didn't do their vetting. And you know what's sad is most parties people think the parties are doing vetting on these candidates, or they think the media is. And sadly, there's very little vetting until these announcements are made.
So just to put a fine point on this, do you think Trump can still win the state of North Carolina, and will you be voting for Trump? You, of course, were with no labels.
Yeah, I'm not stating how I vote. I believe in the confidential vote.
I had to try, Governor.
Well, I'm a media member like you now, so I'm not going to ask you but I will say this. North Carolina has a history of people splitting their ticket. About 5%, give or take a few, split their ticket. And that made a difference in my reelection. I lost by 10,000 votes out of 4.6 million because a small percentage of Republicans split their vote. I anticipate that same trend to occur in North Carolina.
All right. Former Governor Pat McCrory, thank you so much for your time and insight. Always great to see you. Appreciate it.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Coming up, the former president warns that he'll blame Jewish voters if he loses the election while speaking at an event on combating anti-Semitism. Plus, Vice President Harris hits battleground Georgia while hitting Republicans on the issue of reproductive rights after a star-studded campaign event with Oprah. The panel's here to break it all down. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. At an event aimed at fighting anti-Semitism, former President Trump seemed to preemptively blame Jewish voters if he loses in November, suggesting he should have more support from Jewish Americans due to his administration's record of supporting Israel. He then doubled down on those comments at a second event before the Israeli American Council National Summit. Here's some of what he said in those speeches.
So I'm not going to call this as a prediction, but in my opinion, the Jewish people would have a lot to do with a loss if I'm at 40%.
I'll put it to you very simply and as gently as I can. I wasn't treated properly by the voters who happen to be Jewish. I don't know. Do they know what the hell is happening? If I don't win this election, and the Jewish people would really have a lot to do with that if that happens.
Now, it's not clear what polling he's referring to. The former president has repeatedly criticized and attacked prominent Jewish American politicians while saying that any Jewish voter backing Democrats should, quote, have their head examined. Today, in a statement, the Harris campaign slammed the former president for resorting to, quote, the oldest anti-Semitic tropes. Joining me now is Reese Gorman, politics reporter at Notice. Megan Hayes, Democratic strategist and former special assistant to President Biden, and Republican strategist Matt Gorman. Thank you all for being here. Reese, let me start with you. What do you anticipate the impact of comments? It's not the first time he's danced around those types of comments, but it was some of the strongest language, I think, that we've heard.
100%. And you saw two of the biggest Jewish groups in America release statements today. The Anti-Defamation League CEO said that he significantly undermined his message against anti-Semitism yesterday. The AJC also released a statement basically saying that this kind of rhetoric does not help him with anybody, because he's really hurting himself in the foot here, because he's over here trying hard to win over the Jewish vote, but then he's also at the same time like really towing the line on this anti-Semitic language.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. And Matt Gorman, if you are a Trump ally, this is increasingly the concern, right? That he's going out to deliver one message, a message on anti-Semitism, to talk about his record as it relates to this issue, and then he gets diverted.
Yeah, using that jackhammer when you really need a scalpel. And so, yeah, and look, I think this has been also in some way a shape or another for the entire campaign, right? Where he has a message that he can talk about other people with, and he turns it inward. He turns about himself. You heard like, I don't know what, I've been treated very unfairly. There's a lot of eyes in there, and you know, I think that is what you're seeing. The debate, certainly this, and look, I don't think this will have really any tangible impact at the end of the day, but it's just more grist and more fodder and opportunity cost lost.
It's embedded in that message, Megan, is Trump saying, if I lose. And he has made some version of this in different forms, increasingly, I would say, in recent weeks, almost laying the groundwork. Again, we've seen him do this, quite frankly, with every election. If something goes wrong, then if I don't win, then something has gone wrong in this election. This is a Trump strategy. What is the Harris campaign to combat it? We saw the strong statement that they put out.
I mean, I think they're just going to let Trump talk and continue to do what he wants to do. I mean, he did the same thing with women a couple of days ago. You're just like alienating different groups of people that you need to win the election. And whether it's Jewish people or women or people of color, he keeps continuing to do this, and it's always about him, and he's always just saying it's everyone else's fault but mine. But at the end of the day, if he loses in November, it's his fault for not being able to stay on message and talk about the economy and immigration, things that can actually help him get some of these independent voters.
I can't tell you how many Trump supporters I've spoken to who say, just talk about the economy, please. Matt Gorman, let's talk about Mark Robinson.
Oh, let's.
I know you've been waiting to have this conversation. You know, our reporting is that he's not dropping his endorsement of Mark Robinson. He is campaigning in North Carolina this weekend. Robinson is not going to be there. How concerned is the Republican Party that this is going to drag Trump down in this critical state that, frankly, he needs to win?
Yeah, if this were a week ago and that ballot deadline, which passed at midnight last night, there was some more breathing room, very different conversation. I think the endorsement would probably still be on the table. Right now, it gets you nothing to de-endorse because he's going to stay in the ballot. He's going to stay in the race. So you're just pulling it and not really doing anything for it. I will say this, you know, Trump has, even in this election, proven he can outrun weaker statewide candidates in swing states. So I don't think it's too much cause for alarm. We even saw this just in that same state, Cal Cunningham and Roy Cooper. Roy Cooper won. Cal Cunningham obviously self-immolated in a different way in 2020. So there's precedent where if one statewide candidate really goes off the rails here, the person at the top of the ticket can outrun it. I think we're likely to see something like that this time.
Democrats are already up with a new ad tying Trump to Robinson. Megan Hayes, let me play some of that. Get your reaction on the other side. Let's take a look.
He's been an unbelievable Lieutenant Governor, Mark Robinson.
For me, there is no compromise on abortion.
I think you're better than Martin Luther King.
We could pass a bill saying you can't have an abortion in North Carolina for any reason. Abortion in this country, it's about killing a child because you aren't responsible enough to keep your skirt down.
I've been with him a lot. I've gotten to know him, and he's outstanding.
Megan, it's interesting. The Harris campaign chooses to use his controversial comments on abortion and not these latest comments that have surfaced online, like calling himself a black Nazi.
Yeah, I think that this is what they're going on their number one issue, which is abortion. And I also think this will drive turnout and hopefully keep some of the Republicans home because they don't want to turn out for the top of the ticket or for the governor's race. So I think it will impact some of the election or some of the voter turnout in North Carolina, which is a crucial state for Trump to win. And she's closing the gap on some of these really key issues like the economy and immigration. And so I think that you'll see some of that play out in a place like North Carolina, especially when they have a strong top of the ticket.
Yeah, Democrats haven't won there since 2008. Reese, let's talk about the issue of abortion. The vice president in Georgia today talking about exactly that. Let's play a little bit of what she had to say.
Trump and his running mate, and they'll talk about, oh, yeah, but I do believe in the exception to save the mother's life. Okay, all right, let's break that down, shall we? So we're saying that we're going to create public policy that says that a doctor, a healthcare provider, will only kick in to give the care that somebody needs if they're about to die. This is a healthcare crisis. This is a healthcare crisis, and Donald Trump is the architect of this crisis.
Reese, what's so interesting, the economy is still the top issue, but the issue of reproductive rights and abortion is increasing in importance in the minds of voters, if you look at polls.
100%. And also, I mean, we saw it play out in 2022 as well. This is an issue, and it's notable, too, that she was saying this in Georgia, a state that has a 6-week abortion ban. Because, I mean, while Trump is saying, I won't sign a national abortion ban, we'll leave it up to the states, it still matters to voters in these states. And a lot of states do have these bans, if not outright bans, if kind of this week ban or this month ban. And so this is what we're seeing. This is what the message is to drive voters out in these states. And that's kind of what the Harris campaign is betting on here.
Yeah. And Matt, you and I have been talking about this for months.
Yeah.
The challenge for the Trump campaign is that there is no cohesive message when it comes to the issue of abortion. Vice President Kamala Harris has a very clear message. With Trump, you see disparity even with his own vice presidential running mate.
Yeah, I mean, look, what you need to do is, if you're a Republican, counter this, not necessarily answer them on abortion, go down that rabbit hole with them and fight. You need to go and talk about the economy, immigration. And I think, as we talked about, Trump isn't doing that right now. So all it is random comments that Trump makes and then abortion. So it's a lot harder. You need, in essence, message and counter programming, which the Trump campaign is not providing right now.
Yeah, Megan, to that point, I mean, Vice President Kamala Harris, no surprise, she's in Georgia talking about this issue. The mere fact that she is in Georgia underscoring the fact that she and her campaign believe that she now has more potential paths to the White House, because initially it was just about holding on to the blue wall. Not anymore. They're looking at these other states like Georgia and North Carolina and Arizona.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that Democrats, for the first time in a long time, we've coalesced behind each other and we've latched onto an issue and we keep drilling down on that issue. And the Republicans are floundering on how to respond to it, which is new for Republicans, I would think, more in my experience. And so I think that she has latched onto this, and I think she will continue to push it. It's also a very important issue to her. You saw her last night with Oprah talking about this and talking to the family of one of the women who passed away in Georgia from this exact loss. So I think that she is really latched onto this issue, and she is really pushing this. And it's not even just about abortion to her. It's about the freedoms that the Republicans and Trump are trying to take away. So they can go down a rabbit hole on a lot of different issues, but it's really about the protecting freedoms for women.
Yeah, she does try to draw that broader point there. Guys, great Friday conversation. A lot to unpack. Appreciate your sticking with me on all those topics. Reese, Megan, and Matt. Great stuff. Coming up next, Ohio's Republican governor goes after the Trump-Vance campaign's falsehoods about Springfield. I'll talk to the city's mayor about what's next for his community ahead of a potential visit from the former president. Stay with us. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine is once again defending the city of Springfield from false allegations about Haitian immigrants. In a New York Times op-ed, the Republican governor is calling out Donald Trump and J.D. Vance specifically, writing, quote, "As a supporter of former President Donald Trump and Senator J.D. Vance, I am saddened by how they and others continue to repeat claims that lack evidence and disparage the legal migrants living in Springfield. This rhetoric hurts the city and its people, and it hurts those who have spent their lives there." In response, a spokesperson for Vance said, "Senator Vance is glad that Governor DeWine supports the Trump-Vance ticket for president. They're not always going to agree on every issue." This does come days after Donald Trump vowed to visit Springfield in the coming weeks, and a day after Trump ally and Ohio native Vivek Ramaswamy held a town hall in Springfield. Joining me now is Springfield Mayor Rob Rue. Thank you so much, Mayor Rue. Really appreciate your joining us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me on.
I just want to get your reaction to that op-ed by the governor, Governor DeWine. Do you think he went far enough, or do you want to hear even stronger pushback to some of the baseless claims that are being made about Springfield?
The governor's done a very good job of articulating what his points are and how he feels about the situation. He's been incredibly supportive to the city of Springfield, and we're just super appreciative. I think he's done really fine on how he's representing the situation.
Well, you know, last Friday, you said that you did not think it would be a good idea for Trump to visit your city, and yet former President Trump said he plans to do exactly that. He said he wants to visit soon. In fact, I wonder, have you gotten any indication of when that visit might happen? Have you spoken to the former president, and what do you think about him coming now?
No, I've not had any conversation, and you know, it's ultimately going to be his choice to come to town. I've tried to highlight that under the current situation we're in and the spotlight that we've been put under, that it would be a strain to our city. I understand there's many different strains we have in our community, but at this time, it will be difficult. Should he choose to come here, it will be his choice. And of course, the city and the county and other agencies working with the Secret Service will respond in kind.
Will you meet with the former president if he comes to Springfield? And how are you planning for a possible visit?
I think we'll just wait until that point. I don't plan on having any meeting. It's just one of those things that, we'll wait and see what happens and what opportunities are there. I think it will be his decision, like it would be Vice President Harris's decision to come to our town. And so either way.
What is your specific message? Is your message to Trump, don't come to Springfield? What would you say to him?
I think I've been pretty clear prior to this interview that it'll be a strain on our resources if he comes. It will be his choice if he comes. If he chose not to come at this time, it would be okay. And I've said that before. At this time, it would be difficult.
We have been tracking and reporting on the various false bomb threats, but that have sent fear throughout your city. The general sense of anxiety, the feelings that migrants are dealing with of fear. Take us inside right now, what it is like to be there. Is that still what is happening on a day-to-day basis?
So look, what I did today is I visited about several of our schools, walked through with principals, teachers, talked with students, let them know that the community is there for them. We care about them and we care what they're feeling and going through. The kids are curious. It's been a difficult and different week depending on the age. But, our community is resilient. We're a wonderful community and we will come through this. But there is not a feeling of like there's people out right now using our businesses downtown, at the plaza, eating. I mean, it's obviously it's a little busier than normal, but, our community is functioning. We're a beautiful city.
And did you attend the town hall by Vivek Ramaswamy last night? And what do you think the key takeaway was from that?
I watched some of the town hall last night. I did not attend it. I appreciated somebody with a national stage to come into Springfield and speak level-headedly, and that's what I recognized in him. Whether I agree with exactly everything he says, I believe he delivered well and attempted to listen to people's concerns, and I appreciated that.
Just finally, Mayor, what needs to happen to de-escalate tensions in Springfield right now?
Well, I think it would be helpful if we stopped, if people stopped bringing our city up into the debate of immigration. I've said this before, immigration, there needs to be some sort of reform, some sort of accountability to the policies, and that would be good. And I would call on federal legislators to look into that, far more able than I am. But I don't know what exactly is going to stop. I mean, I think time will tell as well.
All right. Well, we are thinking about all of you there and hoping that happens soon. Mayor Rob Rue, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
After the break, a live report from Tel Aviv as Israeli forces and Hezbollah exchange heavy cross-border fire, raising fears of a widening war in the Middle East. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. Israel's military says it killed a senior Hezbollah leader while carrying out what it's describing as a targeted strike in Beirut earlier today. Ibrahim Akil was part of Hezbollah's highest military body and was wanted by the U.S. for his involvement in the 1983 bombings of the U.S. Embassy in Beirut. As recently as last year, the State Department announced a $7 million reward for information on the senior commander. The Lebanese Civil Defense says 2 residential buildings collapsed as a result of the airstrike today. The country's Ministry of Health says 14 people were killed and more than 60 others were injured. This all comes in the wake of the wireless device explosions that have rocked Lebanon this week, raising concerns about the broader tensions in the region and whether it could derail already fraught ceasefire negotiations in the Israel-Hamas war. Here's what President Biden said about those delicate discussions today.
Is it realistic to get to a ceasefire deal, or have too many bad things happen that make it difficult?
If I ever said it's not realistic, we might as well leave. A lot of things don't look realistic until we get them done. We have to keep at it.
Joining me now is Hala Gourani in Tel Aviv. Hala, thank you so much for joining us. So tell us what the mood is like where you are right now, and has there been any change in Israel's security posture in anticipation of retaliation by Hezbollah?
Well, the statements from high-level officials seem to indicate that they are refocusing some of their military effort closer to their northern border with Lebanon. This is, of course, after that assassination that they say they conducted against Ibrahim Akil, who is quite a senior commander within Hezbollah of a unit called the Radwan Force. You mentioned that he was wanted by the United States in connection with the embassy and Marine barracks bombings of 1983. Hezbollah has not confirmed the killing of Ibrahim Akil, but the IDF is saying that they also, alongside Ibrahim Akil, took out 10 other commanders. It appears as though, according to reports, there was some sort of meeting that was happening in that very densely populated part of Beirut with these senior strategic commanders. The force, by the way, interestingly, and this is why Israel says they targeted this particular individual, is responsible for organizing some of the cross-border attacks and activity against Israeli forces in the northern part of Israel. And this is how Israel is justifying this killing. But again, not confirmed by Hezbollah, Kristen.
Hala, how is this big picture impacting Israel's war with Hamas and broader efforts to try to get a ceasefire deal?
So these two things are very much linked, what is happening in southern Lebanon and what is happening in Gaza. And the reason they are linked is because from the beginning, since October 7th, Hezbollah has said, we will stop the war when you stop attacking Gaza. They have very much linked their military efforts and their attacks. Today, for instance, 200 Hezbollah rockets, according to the IDF, crossed into Israel with what is happening in Gaza. And because the ceasefire deal seems to have stalled, this effort to achieve a ceasefire deal, it appears as though we're no closer to a cessation of hostilities in the Gaza Strip or in southern Lebanon and northern Israel. Kristen?
And you certainly heard the skepticism from President Biden there. Hala Garani, thank you so much. Please stay safe. We really appreciate it. Still to come, we are spotlighting the race for Senate in Missouri, where the issue of abortion is now also on the ballot this November. My interview with Missouri's Democratic Senate candidate is next. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. One of the biggest questions for Democrats, will the issue of abortion boost voter turnout in November up and down the ballot? 10 states have an abortion rights amendment on the November ballot, including reliably red Missouri. The Missouri amendment seeks to protect abortions up until the point of fetal viability, which is about 24 weeks. It would allow for exceptions to protect the health of the mother. Missouri has one of the country's strictest abortion bans, with just a few exceptions for medical emergencies. Joining me now is Democratic Missouri Senate candidate Lucas Kunce. Mr. Kunce, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, we are glad that you could be here. There has been a lot of back and forth about whether that amendment that would legalize abortion in Missouri would be on the ballot. Of course, the state Supreme Court last week ruled in a way that will allow it to be on the ballot, making Missouri one of 10 states, in fact, where abortion will be on the ballot in November. Just to be clear, how will you be voting on that amendment?
Oh, I support it 100%. You know, Missouri was the first state to put in a no exceptions for rape and incest abortion ban from day one after Roe versus Wade fell. And, you know, I'm all about taking back people's rights for each other. I think Missourians are smart enough to make their own decisions. We don't need creepy politicians telling us how to live our lives or how to build our families. So I'm 100% behind it. And I'm real excited we're going to take that power back this fall.
So, and just to be clear, this amendment would put a limit on abortion at fetal viability around 24 weeks. Is that where you think the limit should be? Do you think there should be any limits on abortion access?
No, as a U.S. Senator, we lived under Roe versus Wade for a long time. I'm going to vote to codify Roe versus Wade. I think we have to have that because, you know, these constitutional amendments aren't enough. The guy I'm running against, Josh Hawley, has signed on to a national abortion ban that would override the will of all these voters in these states. And so, you know, for me, I think it's at a good spot. I think Roe versus Wade is what we had for a long time. I think the amendment that you see in Missouri is a thing that passed in Ohio and several other states. And I think people are happy with that. And it's a comfortable spot for people to be in.
If you were to be elected, as you know, there is a lot of discussion about potentially changing the filibuster, getting rid of it, changing the rules to pass and to codify Roe v. Wade. Would you support that?
Absolutely. You know, I think what the filibuster is, it's a tool for people who have a lot of money to control our politics, to overwhelm sort of the majority in what the people want, right? It's a tool that lets the status quo stay in place. And all that does is it disenfranchises people like those that I grew up with, you know.
Are you concerned, though, if Republicans ultimately have the power in the Senate, that they might do the same thing to get their own legislative priorities passed, get rid of the filibuster?
I'm not concerned at all. Like, here's the thing, like, if they're in power, the things they are going to do is going to get them thrown out of office so fast. I mean, look at Project 2025, right? Like, Josh Hawley shouldn't be worried in this election, and yet this week there were polls that showed me within 4 points and another one within 5 points. Like, people don't like politicians who are creepy and want to take away their right to make their own decisions. And, you know, Josh Hawley's as bad as you can get on this, right? He thinks, you know, he won't protect in vitro fertilization or contraception. He wrote in 2013 that they're the same thing as murder and abortion. You know, he thinks we should actually get rid of no-fault divorce laws so that people are trapped in unsafe marriages. I'm going to tell you right now, if they do that sort of thing, if they do the Project 2025 things they want to do, if they want to take away workers' rights, they're all going to get thrown out of office. The filibuster's not going to matter. You know, the majority's not going to matter because we're going to have it, and we're going to take back power for everyday people in a landslide, frankly.
Well, you bring up the politics. Let me ask you about the broader politics here. I don't have to tell you, no Democrat has won a Senate seat in Missouri since Claire McCaskill back in 2012, and no Democratic presidential nominee has won there since 2008. Why do you think you can change that trajectory, Mr. Kunce?
You know, I mentioned all the ballot initiatives we've passed over the last couple of years, really taking power back for ourselves and for everyday people. And if you look back just in time, I mean, everybody had this idea that Missouri is a super red state, right? But in 2016, 5 out of our 6 statewide offices were held by Democrats. Our statewide auditor won by 6 percentage points in 2018. Like, it's a place where people are willing to split their ticket. Even in 2016, when Donald Trump won the state by 19 points at the presidential level, our Senate candidate, Jason Kander, another veteran like me, only lost by 2.5 points. Like, we don't have to close the gap as much as Jason did that year. And our governor only lost by that year. Like, people are willing to split their votes when they see a bad guy on the other side, and they got it right here.
And yet, again, when you look at the Senate and the presidential races, they have gone for Republicans in recent elections. So just to be clear, for the record, are you definitively able to say that you are voting for Vice President Harris?
Join this race to decide who the president is, or to tell other people how to decide to vote for the president. You know, it's a uphill battle for me just going around Missouri, asking people to vote for me for U.S. Senate. So I'm focusing on that. I'm real excited to get into this office and win. And I can tell you right now, I will work with anyone and any president to bring money back to our state and do all the things that everyday people here in Missouri need. And that includes codifying Roe versus Wade, ending the filibuster, passing the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, and many other things.
But you're comfortable saying you're going to support the amendment in your state. You're not going to support, or you can't say definitively here and now that you will support the Democratic nominee for president?
Again, I didn't get in the race to try to decide how other people vote for president. I've gotten into this race to sell myself, to talk about what I'm going to do for Missouri, and I just want to stay hyper-focused on that. Like, I want to show the contrast between me and Josh Hawley, and I don't want to spend another second on anything else. And that's where we're going to be. Given
what you've said about Josh Hawley and Project 2025, can you say definitively you won't be voting for former President Trump?
I can tell you what, when I'm in office, I will vote against every single thing that they got in Project 2025 that takes away power from everyday people. And I'm going to make sure that Josh Hawley's not in there to run his Project 2025 agenda going forward in 2025.
What about former President Trump? Would you cast your ballot for him? Is there any chance you would vote for former President Trump?
Again, everybody's trying to get me to tell people how to vote in this election. Or
I just want to know how you're going to vote. I just want to know how you're going to vote.
And I'm just saying, it's not my place, right? Like, I'm in Missouri, we have protected ballots. I'm going to vote for who I'm going to vote for. And I'm going to tell you right now, like, I will not 2025. I will do everything I can to take power back for everyday Missourians. I'll work against that. I'll codify Roe versus Wade, and I'll pass the Protecting the Right to Organize Act.
All right, Lucas Kunce, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And we should note we have invited Senator Hawley to appear on the show as well. We have yet to hear back from his campaign about that. We will be back Monday with more Meet the Press Now. And if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press on your local NBC News station. I'll have exclusive interviews with Senators John Fetterman and Lindsey Graham, plus a brand new NBC News poll on the state of the presidential race. Steve Kornacki will break down all the numbers. The news continues with Tom Costello in for Hallie Jackson right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.